The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is May 19th, 2024, and today we're going to talk about the situation in Ukraine and also a major shift within Russian President Vladimir Putin's cabinet, okay? So, without any further ado, let's get to the front. So, as you can see, this is the situation in Ukraine right now. You can see there's a little strip of red there because, as all of you know, last week, Russia did the unthinkable and launched their offensive into Kharkiv Oblast, marking their return to the province for the first time since 2022. Well, proper, because Kupiansk to me doesn't really count. It just doesn't. But anyway, let's talk about it. Let's zoom in here, and here we are. So, this is the situation right now within the Kharkiv or Kharkov Oblast, which is, by the way, the Russian translation of Kharkiv, by the way, which is Kharkov. And as you can see, the Russians have gained a small chunk, but significant amount of territory. So, to first start off, the Russians have gained control over some villages here, including Lukyantsy, and they're also just outside the outskirts of Lipsy. Now, right now, it appears that the Ukrainians have, the armed forces of Ukraine have, as of right now, stabilized the front line with Russia just outside the outskirts of Lipsy. But if the Russians are able to break through in this area and take Lipsy, then Kharkiv itself, or Kharkov city, will be within direct firing range of the Russian armed forces. So they'll be able to fire on the city and basically cause a lot of damage on it, sort of like they did within early 2022. But for now, this line here is stagnant, and there have been no reported advances from this front for quite some time. But keep an eye on it, because the offensive is still ongoing, and there's a possibility that Russia may open up another front, which I'll discuss in a moment or so from now, okay? So, Russia has also advanced further in this direction, which I will call the Volchansk sector here. They've taken a few villages here, Vatka and Startsia. And as of right now, the Russians officially, at least according to Suryak, have not connected and unified their bridgeheads yet, because they technically have two fronts here. But as soon as they unify with the guys here, then it all becomes a united front, and then they might push further south. And also, getting to Volchansk, by the way, sorry about that, spring allergies, the Russians have reportedly taken control over most, if not all, of the northern part of Volchansk. Now, almost all of the high-rise areas within the city or town are now under Russian control. Literally all of the commie blocks and the city square itself, or the town square, and I guess maybe City Hall, are all under Russian control. The local ATB market is also probably under Russian control at this point. Sorry about that, I kind of slipped off my tongue because I'm kind of tired at the moment. And there's also a report that the Russians have crossed the Volcha River here, which is in southern Volchansk. Now, if Russians take control of Volchansk, then there's a high possibility they are going to take control over this entire strip here of land, this entire strip of bordering areas with Ukraine. And as I said in one of my previous videos, the Russians in this on this front are looking to reverse the losses that they have sustained in the infamous September 2022 Kharkiv counteroffensive by the armed forces of Ukraine, in which the lack of Russian manpower led to the Ukrainians essentially steamrolling them across the entire province, like east of the Savetsky Donets River, and it caused the Russians to not only withdraw their troops back to Russia, but they also had to redeploy them to other fronts, like such as the Lugansk Oblast and the Donetsk Oblast, which is where a lot of them have been in for quite some time now, like nearly 2 years. But yeah, now to speak about another possible front that's opening up, I am, of course, talking about the Sumy Oblast. Now, the reason why Sumy could get opened up soon again, it's to further stretch Ukrainian resources up there, but also because of the fact that Sumy is sort of like, as I said, a backbone to whoever like controls Kharkiv. Now, if the Russians were to start the offensive on Sumy Oblast, like they did with Kharkiv just recently, again, I'm not expecting it to be some big arrow, super duper wow offensive. I'm just not expecting that. Like, I don't expect that at all. If anything, they're just going to further stretch the Ukrainians a lot longer, and I am expecting them to sort of use both Kharkiv and Sumy as diversionary areas while they do the main push somewhere in the Donetsk Oblast or maybe in Zaporozhye Oblast too. And the evidence that a possible offensive on Sumy is happening is because somewhere in this area, a field hospital has been sighted via satellite imagery, like a field hospital for possibly like wounded veterans. So they're getting ready to start an assault into the Sumy Oblast. So yeah, keep an eye on this area because it is obvious that Russia sees this, Kharkiv, and basically all of left bank Ukraine as sort of like their, I guess, sanitary zone or buffer zone or what. I mean, Vladimir Putin is not going to say it out loud because he doesn't want to make things too obvious, but what people are speculating is that he wants to expand the Russian territory to the point of, I guess, maybe the left bank of the Dnieper River, which covers literally all of eastern Ukraine, and that would put NATO weaponry, I guess, outside of reach for Moscow, even though ATACMs and F-16s, though, may say otherwise. Now, to get away from that, let's talk about the situation within the Kupiansk direction. Now, I have heard that Russians are advancing in Berestove here, which is a little small, tiny village here. So, yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're probably not going to care about that. And that's also within Kharkiv Oblast, too. And as far as I can see, I wouldn't be shocked if the main direction of advance could also be the eastern section of the Orska River, which Russia has wanted back for quite some time because they lost that entire area in the infamous, again, Kharkiv counteroffensive by the armed forces of Ukraine. And I've also heard reports that Russians are advancing somewhere down these lines here, but it's been a mostly frozen front line. Like, nothing has really happened that much in quite some time. Even though there have been reported movements within the Kharkiv Oblast, it's still nothing too significant just yet. Now, let's get to Robotine here. Now, Suryak has not colored it in yet, even though there now have been some geolocation confirmations. But Robotone is still sort of contested, even though it's not quite contested anymore. It's now all empty fields in which the Ukrainians control now. Robotone itself is under Russian control. Like, they literally have recaptured it from the Ukrainians. And I wouldn't be shocked if within the next couple of months or so, like by the end of the summer campaign, the Russians literally restore all the lines back to what they were before the counteroffensive last year in 2023. So yeah, don't be surprised if that occurs. And to get to the Velika Novosilka sector, Staromaisky and Urozhainy are both still contested, though there have been no geolocations or any major changes yet. And I'm expecting no changes for quite some time, though I am expecting the Russians to recapture both settlements in the future, which will give the Russians a wide open road to Velika Novosilka, which the Russians just fell short of during the initial 2022 invasion. And I am expecting things to get easier for them as time goes by, because in other parts of the front, the Russians have also captured the majority of Gorhivka or Hurhivka. And by doing so, the next settlement that is next, and this is a pretty longer one, and it's much harder, more difficult when compared to our Gorhivka, it's Maximilianivka. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly because, again, I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian. But apparently this entire strip of land is the next possible, like, a place of contention. And then after that, we then get to a possibly decisive battle for the southern Donetsk front, which is Kharkove. Now, Kharkove is home to a sizable power plant, and it's also sort of like an industrial area, too, within the Donetsk Oblast. And if Kharkove falls, you can pretty much guarantee that pretty much everything here is going to fall to Russia, including Velika Novosilka and Ugledar. And then, yeah, it gets basically easier there. And also, don't forget, Krasnogorivka is about to fall too. In fact, the far eastern section of the city, or the town, again, which is one of the last major areas of Donetsk city that are still under AFU control, is now under majority control of Russia. It now looks like 55 to 60% of Krasnogorivka is under Russian army control. They are about to take the high-rise commie blocks here, and all that's left for the Russians to really do in this area is to take the residential areas, this small hospital here, and the Central Park. And then after that, battle for Krasnogorivka comes to an end. But yeah, Russians are advancing there. Nataliove is also pretty much now under Russian control completely, though I am expecting them to sort of like stop the advance for quite some time because of the fact that there's like a river crossing here, and I'm expecting Ukrainians to blow up the, I guess, the bridge that connects Nataliove to Karlivka. And then after that, I'm also going to expect the Russians to maybe recapture Nivilske, because as soon as Krasnogorivka falls, the Ukrainians will have no choice but to withdraw from Nivilske. Like, they'll have to eventually leave. Like, they literally cannot stay there. And I will expect the Russians to maybe take a bunch of empty fields before they come across this heavily urbanized area here. Kharkivka, Zrany, Alexandriopol, Hernik, which is strategic, Zelane Drew, Zelane Persh, and a little above here, Ukrainsk. And then, yeah, these two other villages here, which will then lead to Seladove, which is a city located in central Donetsk Oblast. But, yeah, I'm expecting the Russians, after Krasnogorivka, to maybe advance towards this area here, which is going to be very difficult for the Russians to control because of how highly urbanized it is, though I am not expecting a push here for quite some time due to the fact that CHASIV YAR is still ongoing. And speaking of which, we'll get to there now. Oh, and by the way, Omanske is now pretty much under Russian control too, along with, let's see, Russians are still consolidating on their gains that they've made here, north and south of Ocheretine. And I'm not expecting any movements here for quite some time. Also because of due to the ongoing Kharkiv offensive by Russia, and also due to the fact that CHASIV YAR is contested. And that is something we're going to discuss right now. So, at long last, the Russians have advanced into the Canal Microdistrict. I almost pronounced it incorrectly. But they have now advanced into eastern CHASIV YAR. And even though there is speculation that the Russians have taken most of the Canal District from the Ukrainians, there is still a lot of disputes regarding like geolocations, and also a lot of mappers are telling like various stories on what actually has happened in CHASIV YAR itself. But one conclusion that we can certainly do make is that the Russians have now seized total control over the forested areas outside of CHASIV YAR's like eastern section. And they have also now broken through into CHASIV YAR itself, and have now taken a significant chunk of the town. So if they were to take the micro canal district, like the canal micro district, then they should be able to advance into the main town itself, which is very strategic. It will then give Russians like literal high ground over Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, and I guess Toretsk. And it will make life a living hell for Ukrainians there. And someone has once told me that CHASIV YAR is sort of like a speed bump, as I said multiple times in the past. And yeah, if CHASIV YAR were to fall to Russia, then it's going to pose as a major problem for Ukrainians, because all those towns, Konstantinivka, Slovyansk, Kramatorsk, they're all literally like low areas, like they're flat itself, while CHASIV YAR is very hilly, and control of it would basically, as many would say, decide who would control the entirety of, I guess, northern Donetsk Oblast. But yeah, and also, Suryak has not updated the map yet, but I've already gotten reliable reports that Klashivka, which was contested, like highly contested by Russians and Ukrainians throughout 2022 and 2023, has fallen again back to the Russian army as of today. And if the reports are true, the Ukrainians are probably going to retreat also from Avdiivka and then to this, basically back to the western areas here of the Donbass or Severodonetsk Donetsk canal, and that would give the Russians significant control over Artemovsk, and that would essentially make the roads a lot easier to go through, and it would also make the rail lines also less dangerous to also use, by the way, because Ukrainians as of right now still have sort of like access to the railways, but if this area is all cleared here, then the Russians should be able to get supplies in and out of Artemovsk without many issues. So yeah. So now to go to mainland Russia itself. I should talk about the cabinet changes that have been done in Moscow. So this is Far West Russia, Voronezh and Kursk, and then you got the infamous city of Belgorod here, which Ukrainians love to harass. Voronezh. Voronezh. I can't pronounce these cities' names right. Major skill issue on my end. But yeah, we're going up north. Up. And here we are. Moscow. So, not long after the Red Square Parade, which was on May 9, 2024, which was a day before the Kharkiv offensive by the Russian army, it is now confirmed that Vladimir Putin has made some major changes to his cabinet. So, for instance, Vladimir Putin has now resorted to this guy being literally his right-hand man. Now, for those of you who don't know who Alexei Dumin is, he is the aide to the president of Russia, and apparently he now controls essentially the military-industrial complex of Russia, and he also now controls the, the sports like stuff like for the athletes. He used to be the deputy minister of defense under Sergei Shoigu, who is no longer, by the way, the minister of defense. That is now the responsibility of Andrei Bulusov. Shoigu is still very much in the Russian government, but he's no longer directly in charge of the Ministry of Defense. He still will play a role in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but he's no longer the Minister of Defense, which I assume for business reasons. So, but yeah, basically to describe the responsibilities of Alexei Dumin, let's see here. I'm looking it up here on Telegram. It's a very interesting, let's see here. Here we go. So, he will oversee issues of the military-industrial complex, sports, and the state council in the presidential administration. Nikolai Patrushev will deal with shipbuilding issues, Dmitry Peskov reported. He also commented on the appointment of Sergei Shoigu to the post of Secretary of the Security Council. According to him, this is a high government post with a high range of tasks, great responsibility, and direct contact with the president. There is no fear in the Kremlin that personal changes in the Ministry of Defense could bring disorganization to the Russian troops, and I doubt it will. But anyway, so again, Alexei Dumin, former deputy minister of defense. He was a former Russian general. He helped the Russian army in their wars in Chechnya, in their wars in Georgia, and probably he did play a role in helping out the intervention in Syria too. And he also played a key role in the takeover of Crimea from Ukraine. Like, they stole it. He holds the rank of lieutenant general and was awarded the title of Hero of the Russian Federation. And he's been governor of Tula Oblast for 8 years. Now, he's still the governor of Tula Oblast, but however, his responsibilities now are much more extended. And there's a lot of speculation on the street that Alexei Dumin might be considered for a possible, I guess, he will eventually become the president of Russia in the distant future. Like, he will literally take Vladimir Putin's place because, as all of you know, Putin is 71 years old. He'll be 72, by the way, this year. And, yeah, I just don't see Vlad sticking around for a lot longer. I don't know if he's going to be president by the time he's 80. And for that reason, I think this is going to be the man who's going to take Putin's place. And also, don't forget, he was also Vladimir Putin's bodyguard, too. Like, he actually protected him, like, wherever he went. He was sort of like the head of, like, his own personal secret service. But, yeah, I think he's going to be the next possible head of state of Russia, maybe within the next few years or so after Putin retires or dies. And I'm expecting him to carry on Putin's policies, if not becoming more like hardcore than Putin was, because Putin is, for Russia standards, quite moderate, and a lot of people don't seem to really understand that, because Putin is really obsessed with upholding the law no matter where he is, despite the fact he invaded Ukraine. And yeah, and speaking of the changes within government, and so let's actually go back to Ukraine before we actually focus on another appointment within the Russian government. And I'm, of course, talking about Shoigu's replacement. So, yeah, as all of you know by now, Zelensky's term in office, which he served since 2019, is about to expire. So this means the Russian government can essentially now have claims over Ukraine's presidential seat. So you might start getting a lot of people within Russia and maybe within Ukraine proclaiming themselves to be the true and honest, legitimate president of Ukraine. Like, it's going to be crazy. So, I mean, yeah, once his term expires tomorrow, then Zelensky will be viewed by the Russian state as pretty much as a dictator. So he literally becomes no different from Vladimir Putin in this regard, except Putin at least had some elections, even though a lot of people would cry foul and say that they were unfair. But yeah, so maybe Putin can then maybe, just to troll some people, proclaim himself to be the president of Ukraine, even though he already is president of around 18% of the country. But yeah, getting back to the changes within the Russian government. So besides Alexei Dumin, who in my opinion is the big, like the actual big promotion, we also got to talk about the new Minister of Defense, Andrei Belousov. Now, Belousov, unlike Shoigu, is a Slavic Russian. And also, just like Shoigu, he's not really a very military person. Now, even though Shoigu was part of the Russian military since the 90s, the military wasn't really his first main priority. Apparently, he was doing like engineer and like constructive work before the collapse of the Soviet Union. But Andrei Belousov is a very interesting guy because apparently his dad was actually a key member of the Soviet Union's establishment under the former dictator, Ukrainian dictator Leonid Brezhnev. And Belousov is an economist. Now, before this promotion, this sudden promotion, Belousov was the first deputy prime minister. So he reports to Mikhail Mishustin. He was temporarily prime minister for a bit while Mishustin, I guess, had COVID or something. I don't know why he went out for a month. He was the economic assistant to Putin for 7 years and was also Minister of Economic Development for 1 whole year. But yeah, he is a literally economy like centric guy. And I guess the reason why Putin promoted this guy to becoming the Minister of Defense is most likely because I feel like it's for logistics reasons. And don't forget, the Ministry of Defense is now boosting their manufacturing. So, yeah, don't be surprised if this guy turns out to be some sort of a game changer because of the fact that he's literally now in charge of literally the Russian military-industrial complex. So, yeah, he's definitely going to be key throughout 2024 and 25 as the war in Ukraine progresses. And, yeah, but also expect him to maybe report to Alexei Dubin before everything goes to Vladimir Putin himself. But, yeah, so I guess that's going to do it for today's video. I heard about the reports of Ibrahim Raisi's helicopter crashing. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's dead at this point because they literally cannot find the chopper. It's literally all in fog. Like, they literally can't find anything. But, yeah, so that's going to do it for today's Hague video. I'm sorry if there's no shorts yet because I'm still experimenting with how I'm going to do the shorts in question. And, yeah, I hope you'll understand the delays in, like, question itself. But, yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys all have a great Sunday, and I'll see you all next week. Farewell, and have a great day.